you mind pulling up the questions too?
Yeah, I can pull them up on here. Yeah, if you want to stand right about there,
gotcha.
you can see whether you're in the
okay.
camera or not there.
So I guess this is an entrepreneur class, correct? You guys all want to be entrepreneurs someday, maybe? Deciding?
There's some variance. I mean, other people have other career plans, but I think a lot of the people in here have interest in having their own business at some point.
So I've done both. I've worked in corporate environment. I've also had my own business for a number of years. So, just a little bit about myself. You guys got my bio, okay? My parents immigrated here back in the 1960s. They came over from Indonesia. They ended up in Ridgecrest, of all places. I don't know if you guys know where that is, but that's eastern Kern County. Naval base, where they did naval weapons testing, north of Edwards Air Force Base. So there's a lot of aerospace activity out there. Not that I really cared about it because I was young growing up. From there, I actually, after I graduated high school there, I came over to Bakersfield. I wanted to go to college, but at that time, they didn't really have an IT degree. So to be in IT back then, which is really at the beginning, even before Microsoft. So you guys are really young. So imagine having a company like Microsoft that's just now beginning. And that time, the computers was really a really new technology. We didn't even have cell phones. We had dial phones. You probably haven't seen those. Yeah, well, yeah, with the rotating dial, the numbers 0 to 9. So that's how you got a hold of people. I mean, you didn't text, you didn't page. You guys probably don't remember pagers, but there was pagers at that time. So I've seen a lot of that, okay? And so my first corporate job was with a company back in 1982 out at Kern River, which is north of here. It was Getty Oil Company, okay? That's the old Getty family that had a lot of money, invested in oil, and they were very successful here in Kern County. Right after that, they were sold to Texaco. You guys are familiar with Texaco, Chevron Texaco. A lot of mergers going on. And so back then, because there wasn't any degrees, there wasn't really computer networking. There wasn't even a computer at that time. The closest thing, I first learned on calculators, actually. We programmed calculators, and we stored the programs on either their big floppy disks, which you guys probably don't know what think of it as like digital pizzas. They're about this big, and they held like maybe 128K. So a lot of our programming is what we call machine language programming, because really deep programming, not what you guys are exposed to today. Okay. So technologies, I've been in it quite a bit. And back then, since I was the only one that was really, they were the company said, hey, you know what, we want to start getting into computers. Is there anybody, we were in a staff meeting, anybody that wants to, help out and take that role? And so I'm in the room, I'm the only one that raised my hand because I had an interest in that, and I was taking a few classes focused around programming and related computers. And that's how I got my start in my career. Okay. Now I didn't finish college back then because I ended up being basically the MIS manager for the company at the time. And my thought process back then was, you know what, I'm making really good money. Why do I want to get a degree? And plus, they really didn't have an MIS degree. They had a business degree. Cal State had just opened up here back then. Okay, so it was out by itself. There was no houses or anything. So that's actually the houses, the apartments stopped at Ash. That's how long ago it was. So you guys, unless you have parents that lived here, you wouldn't even know that. Okay. So, but I do recommend, because what I've seen in my career in corporate America is that a degree is very important. Not only a 4-year degree, but most, for example, like Chevron, where I worked at as a consultant contractor, I'm going to guess that 90% of the employees they hire have master's degrees. Okay, so continue with your education. Okay, because if I had to do it over again, and I don't know if this is one of the questions, I would have gotten my degree. I would have carved out time Even if it took me 8 years, I would have gotten it, okay? Because I think it still would have helped me. Even though I was relatively successful as an entrepreneur owning my own business, I think I would have got further. And if I wanted to stay in corporate America back then, okay, because I worked for Texaco Chevron from 82 to about 89, started my own business, and ran my own business, and I started from scratch. I took no loans. There was no loans against the business at that time either. I mean, I did it all by myself. And the business finally closed in 1993, so it was that long. So I went out as a consultant, and there's a question in here in my list is why did your company stop? And I'll get into that later, because those are things that you won't learn in class. You'll learn from somebody that talks about what happens in the real world with business, and all the regulations and stuff like that. I mean, you could have seminars. California is one of the toughest states to do business in, so just to let you know. But also California is probably one of the most successful states to be an entrepreneur in. Because if you look at Silicon Valley, all those businesses start out with somebody that was an entrepreneur that had an idea and grew it from there. Very successful. And even if they started out outside Microsoft, really, with Bill Gates and Steve Ballmer, when those guys got together, they were in California and actually bought the first operating system. He didn't create it, they bought it. And they were lucky because Bill Gates had a vision. Okay, so that's the other thing, being an entrepreneur, you have to have a vision for yourself. Okay. So after that, after the business closed, I went out and started consulting. I primarily focused on sensors like flow meters, communications, not actually dealing with the sensors itself, but communications to these devices out in the field, whether it was cellular, copper, fiber, wireless, some type of microwave link. That's what we did. So I found a niche even in the business, and that's what we focused on. We had a niche that no one else did, or very few people did, so we eliminated our competition because we virtually had no competition. Okay, and I built relationships from there. So at Chevron, that's pretty much what I did. They hired me. They didn't hire me. I was a contractor, but they brought me on board as a contractor based on my experience. And I actually worked in a department that did proof of concepts. We looked at all new technologies here in the Valley for Chevron. In some cases, they used the technology globally for Chevron. So, and I was assigned as a solution engineer. I'd go out in the field. I'd work with vendors, get communications, and we would test, and we would really work with the vendors to whether it was installing their technology out in the field, in the oil fields. We would have like anywhere from a 6 months to a 3-year test. Okay, and we had projects that were in the millions of dollars. Okay, because it's really important to Chevron, and I'll get into that. How it's every company is looking to be more efficient, save money. Okay, because that's really helps the bottom line. If you can do something more efficiently, faster, better, less expensive, then you're going to make more money. That goes directly to your bottom line after operating costs. Okay, so I did that, and then ironically, they started looking at drones. What can we do with drones here at Chevron? And my boss, I'm good friends with now, probably a good thing because he didn't fire me. I told him, I said, hey, I got a pilot's license. I've been a pilot since 1987. I got a pilot license at the end of my career at Getty. Then when I had my own business, I flew my own airplanes because we did work all the way up the valley to Sacramento, out to New Mexico. And it was more efficient for me to fly to these meetings. We had contracts with the Bureau of Indian Affairs in Arizona and New Mexico, and also with the school districts up and down the valley. So I had to be in a lot of places, and it was more efficient for me. Plus, growing up in the Naval Air Station, I saw these jets growing up, and I'm thinking, hey, I want to do that. That looks like it's fun. So didn't go in the military, wanted to, but my eyes weren't good enough. And to be a pilot, In the military, you have to have a 4-year degree. So you have to have a degree before you could even apply for it. Then you have to go through all the processes and get your certification, pass the military requirements. So so I worked with Chevron. They brought me onto their drone project, and I actually did I oversaw all of the drone operations. I reviewed all the flight platforms. I reviewed all the sensors that they wanted to use, because I had a good idea of where Chevron could save money. And for example, is a lot of the oil in California is very heavy. It's like molasses. So in order to get it out of the ground, you've got to heat it up, what they call the reservoir, where the oil pools in the formation. And you got to get that to move. So imagine taking a straw and trying to suck molasses through a straw. Okay, but if you heat up molasses and it's thinner, it'll flow better, you'll be able to produce more. So that's really the basic concept of what they do is they inject steam into the reservoir in the ground to heat up the oil, to move it to the wellbore, and they pump it out. Okay, because if it's really thick, you can't pump it, and it takes more energy with the pumping units to go up and down to pump it out. So that's how they produce more. Now, with that said, Chevron generates steam out in the fields, and that is probably the highest cost. The biggest operating cost is fuel oil, because they have these generators. They have to buy fuel to fire the boilers to create the steam, to get it out to the fields, to inject it in the ground. So they have to have a certain quality that they inject. Okay. So one of the first things that we did was, with the drones, was we were looking at the thermal aspect of doing a map or a heat trace of all the steam lines out in the field that inject steam in the ground. So with that, we could determine our temperature loss from the generators all the way. And you might have miles of steam lines that steam has to travel. And what happens, yes, they're insulated, but you're going to have steam loss before it's injected. Okay. So what we're trying to do is, if we could save 3 to 5% of fuel oil cost to create that steam, that was worth roughly 10, 20, 30, 40, 50 million dollars in savings. Okay, if we could determine where our heat was, we were losing our heat. And to do that, we would take drones. The proof of concept was take the drones with the thermal imaging sensor, fly it over the field. We could identify through the colors. The wider the color on your map, your image, the hotter the steam temperature is. When it starts turning to gray, that you're losing heat. Okay, so that's one application. The other applications is high resolution mapping. Okay, and what would we use that for? Is that, for example, you want to make sure that you drill the well in the right spot. Yeah, they use GPSs, but there's a lot of wells that were drilled many, many years ago before we had GPS technology. So the biggest conflict there is that if a well or a steam injection well is drilled on a competitor's property, because out in the field, the leases are like checkerboards. Not one company owns, there might be some contiguous sections that they own, but for example, on the west side out in Kittrick and Midway, Sunset, it's like a checkerboard. Okay, so the conflict is that if you're pumping oil out of your competitor's reservoir, they're not going to like that, and it's just a big problem. So you want to avoid that. So that's one. Another one is mapping. Part two of that is 3D modeling, and being able to fly over a facility and do what they call, and I'll probably get over you guys' head, and if I am, I'll kind of scale it back, is 3D point clouds, where they use lasers, LiDAR, and they shoot the LiDAR, and it creates an image or a map of the facility, like a tank facility, so that now they can look at volumes in that tank. Or if it's a mining company, you fly it over the pits, and it gives you volumetrics, okay, of that pit, so how much how deep it is, and how much in a mining situation, how much they've mined out of that ground. Okay, whether if it's open pit, obviously you can't do that if it's underground mining because you can't see it. So as far as drone technology is still relatively new. The military's had it for a long time. They've used that, but commercially, it's when I say new, I'm going to say within the 5 to 8 years, but more recently, in the last 3 to 4 years, it's gotten a lot of attention because there's a lot of smaller companies that are coming out with drones, and there's a lot of hobbyists using drones, and now there's people like you guys that say, okay, how can I take this, what other people think are model toys, how can I make money with this drone? Okay, and there's a number of ways, but I will tell you that the market is still pretty young because there's a lot of technologies, there's a lot of drone companies, there's a lot of good. Recently, a drone company went out of business, which was we were actually going to use at Chevron their drones, 3DR. Okay, and I'm not sure why I didn't really read a lot about it, but with the applications, you've got to take this data that you collect. Because really, in actuality, the sensors are basically cameras, high-resolution cameras. So basically, when the drone flies over a field, it takes pictures. So now imagine having a bunch of pictures you've taken, and now you've got to stitch them together, and stitch them together accurately within a few inches. So if I'm following a pipeline, for example, I don't want, in the pictures, it's got to be contiguous, like it's one photo versus multiple photos stitched together. Okay. So when you do that, and you have high-resolution images, and you're talking megapixels, and you've got 500 or 1,000 maybe for an acre of land, that's a lot of processing power. Okay, so there's what they call post-processing. After you collect the data, you've got to process the data so you can make sense of it, whether you're an engineer or an architect or whatever. So there's other applications for drones as well. So that's mapping is one. Mapping is probably one of the biggest ones. Farming, okay, what they use that for, they use basically similar. You're still taking pictures that you've got to stitch together. But what they're looking at is their NDVI, Normalized Difference Vegetation Index. They want to look based on the spectrum, a color spectrum of the crop, on what the condition of the crop is. Okay. They also want to see the moisture content in the field as well, because that's really important to them. Especially here in California, where you're basically limited on water. You got to take that water. You got to use it wisely. Okay. Especially if you're a farmer, you don't want to waste water. Okay. That's not a good thing here in California. So that's another application, and how that translates into savings. It's like the oil and gas, understanding the facilities, the steam loss, the high-resolution mapping of all their facilities and their wells and exact locations on where they sit. In farming, when you're looking at your crop, you're going to know where you need more water, where you have a problem with insects, where you got to spray more insecticide. Okay, so when it comes to environmental issues, you don't want to overspray in areas that you don't need to kill insects because there are none. So that's another application. And what they do is they've gotten so sophisticated, and they still got a long ways to go, is they fly over the fields, whether it's corn or almonds or whatever. They look at the plant, the vegetation, and the agronomist, he'll take that information, he'll look at it and decide on a prescription for that field and what type of chemicals they need to apply to resolve, like a plant issue, like the plant has insects, or maybe it's not healthy and they need more fertilizer. So they take that map then, that file, they convert it, and they give it to the sprayers. Have computers on there now where they could adjust the volume of spray for that particular area. So if you need more fertilizer in this area, it's going to spray more, but as it gets over this area, we need less. It sprays less fertilizer on the crop. Okay. So again, they're saving money, not overspraying, and they're increasing their yield on their crop by accurately prescribing what they need to make sure they get a high crop yield. For farmers, whether it's corn, grapes, almonds, walnuts, the higher yield you get, the more money they make. And chemicals are expensive. Regulations, as far as regulating those chemicals, something they've got to be aware of. So that's how ag uses it. And I'm sure there's other applications that I'm not even aware of because I'm mainly exposed. I've done a little bit with farming, and I've done, I'm going to say a little bit with oil and gas for the most part, which in most cases, I'm finding out that there's really not a lot of people, because I get a lot of calls on my LinkedIn because they say, oh, okay, you got experience in drones and all this. And yeah, I consider I have experience. I think I have a lot where I'm comfortable with. I'd like to gain more, but the industry's changing rapidly. Okay. So with that said, should we get in the questions?
Yeah, sure. I've got them pulled up here for you.
Okay. So so the first question is from
Abdullah.
Abdullah.
So you got the last name, comma, first name
Okay.
on all these. And Abdullah's not here. He usually sits over in this direction, but it's a great question, so I'd like you to answer it anyway.
So the question is, how do you feel about the possible dangerous of drones, for example, unmanned drones harming civilians? Do you think they ever be 100% safe? The bottom line is nothing's going to be ever 100% safe, okay? And the FAA, there's a lot of regulations. When I first started getting into drones, they had what they call a Section 333. And basically what the FAA, because it was so new even to the government to regulate drones. You got to remember, these basically they're aircraft, but they're not manned aircraft. They fly on their own, and they have maybe a remote pilot, okay? So the FAA didn't know what to do as far as they knew they needed to regulate drones because of the dangers of what it could happen. And what they did is they took regulations from their general aviation rules and regulations, and they took that and blanketly applied it to drones. Okay, there's a big difference. Really the main thing is, I'll go to that, is airspace. Okay, and I think there was a question, did me being a pilot help me? It absolutely did, because you have to understand airspace around airports, airspace around civilians, airspace with other aircraft. Okay, so I actually had to write the standard operating procedure for Chevron and integrate it with our ground operations from a safety aspect. And it was interesting because I had to go get clarification from the FAA. I had to work with Central Aviation. I had to work with our people on the ground and say, okay, for example, you have to, our ceiling to fly a drone is 400 feet, period. And they actually now have what they call geofences, where a lot of your new drones, they won't go up higher than 400 feet. And that's above AGL, what they call it, above ground level. But then there's also regulation that says you can't be within 500 feet. Okay, so you got to really think that through, because you can't vertically above somebody. You can't go higher than 400 feet above ground level. So you can't be higher than that. So the 500-foot rule is technically not straight up above that person. It's away from that person. Okay, so horizontally is what I'm saying. So now, for example, we had at Chevron, we had to fly drones over active fields that had contractors on the ground. Is it dangerous? I don't think so. But we had to abide by the rules because we could get fined, okay, by the FAA. So we had to work through those things. There's a 5-mile rule that you can't be within 5 miles of an active airport. For obvious reasons, you got a plane coming in. There's always, you hear on the news that there's a drone, there's a near miss with like a police helicopter, or, a lot of people go out, hobbyists tend to go out because they don't know the rules, and they'll fly a drone because, oh, hey, there's a fire or there's something, and they've got first responders, they got, fire retardant aircraft dropping, chemicals on the fire to put it out. Then they got drones. So, that, can a drone take down an aircraft? Absolutely, it can. Okay, in most cases. But the reality of it is you don't want a collision between any aircraft, whether it's manned aircraft or unmanned aircraft, even together. Okay, so again, the FAA is still working through that. So what they did recently, so let me go back to, in order to get your 333 exemption, okay, you had to be a pilot, and you had to apply for it. They wanted to make sure that you understood, the rules that they've already set aside for that. And being a pilot obviously did help, okay, with that. So that was important. And that was one of the reasons why they brought me onto the team, because I was the only pilot that was part of the drone group. Okay. We had another pilot, but he was actually a geologist. His primary duty was geology work. He didn't have time to go out and work with the vendors, but I interfaced with him, because he was company and I was a contractor, and we worked together on that. So, so it's very difficult to get your 333. It actually, you had to apply for it, and then it took me 8 to 10 months to finally get my thing from the FAA, my certification. And then they changed it. August 29th, I think, is the actual date. They changed the requirements. They called it Part 107. So all you have to do there is you take a test, and the test is primarily, I'm going to say not all of it, most of it is airspace, because again, you got to understand airspace, where you're flying, how high you're flying over people. So they want you to understand that. You don't have to be a pilot. You just have to pass the test, take the class, pass the test. And there's a lot of online classes. So with that said, if you pass your Part 107 test, legally you can fly commercially. And the commercial definition is if you charge for flying. For example, if I'm American Airlines, I got to be certified because I'm a commercial operator, because I charge to transport passenger. So if you're thinking, okay, you know what, I got a real estate friend, and they're going to pay me $100 to take pictures of his listings, that's commercial operations, because you're charging for those services. So keep that in mind if you decide to get into that. And that, again, that's another way to make money. Again, the issue there is the rules and understanding the rules. It's very difficult to take photographs of homes and stay 500 feet away from people, because it doesn't say whether they're in the house or outside. It just says 500 feet. Okay, but there's a lot of people that are doing that aren't certified by the FAA, that are flying and making money, and we call those sky pirates, because they're really messing up the system. They're one of the big reasons why the FAA is starting to clamp down. What I see in the future, though, however, is I see the FAA regulating or controlling airspace even for drones. And the reason why is because you've got Amazon, you've got FedEx, you've got all these people that want to deliver packages, by drone. There's a company up in Nevada that already actually has an exemption from the FAA to start delivering packages. It's anywhere from Amazon that you order to medicine at home. I can see somebody like Rite Aid getting into that. So now just imagine this. How many packages does Amazon deliver that a drone can carry? Small packages, right? Whether they're sunglasses or cell phone accessories. How many packages daily do you think they deliver? A lot. I don't know the answer to that. And imagine having even half of that amount delivered by drone. There's going to be chaos in the air very quickly. Okay. So I see, and I'm just guessing, being a pilot for so many years and understanding airspace and everything like that they're going to do that eventually. Okay. So let's go on with the next question. I kind of got it. Did you ever see yourself moving to Bakersfield, or was that something that just happened? I wanted to get out of Ridgecrest. I wanted to get out of the desert. Ridgecrest was a small town, really small. My high school only had, with freshman through senior, 400 or 500. You look at the schools here now. You got a freshman class, it's 2,000. Okay, so it's real small. And I didn't want to move. I actually was considering going down to Irvine to go to UC Irvine, and I just couldn't afford it. It was too expensive. I mean, it's even more expensive today. But Bakersfield was a nice jump. It was somewhat of a small town, and you live here. And at that time, Cal State was getting bigger. Okay, next question. What are some things you don't like about your job? Well, that's it. You know, I could tell you, okay, I know what that is. Every job, corporate, or even if you're your own job and you're working for a customer, you got to work with people, okay? And I consider myself a pretty nice guy. But there are people out there that just, I mean, whatever. I had a guy that didn't like the color of my socks. He hated me. He wanted to get me fired. I don't know what it was, okay, to that day. But every once in a while you run across people like that, and you don't know why. They just don't like you. And it could be that you're a threat to them as far as your career move going up. And that was happened to me at Texaco. That's one of the reasons why I quit and started my own job. Ironically, I was contracted back by Texaco with a different division in the cogen, and I had more work than I could see. I mean, I had a lot of work because of my value. But I had a couple individuals there that, for whatever reason, didn't like me. And politically, one person ended up being my boss, and he pretty much made it hard for me. He took everything away, all my good projects away, and so you're going to deal with that. You just got to overcome it. You know, you got to try to get along with people, especially in corporate America, the best you can. The people that, for whatever you don't get along with, just, you know, I say ignore it and do your job. Show value to your employer. That's key. How do you think drones have helped the ag and oil industry? I think I went over that. In oil and gas, they're trying to figure out how to lower their operating cost. A good example is oil prices. Okay, oil prices back in, I don't know, 4 or 5 years ago were over $100 a barrel. Okay, when you see that, you see a lot of people coming into Bakersfield working for the oil industry because oil prices are high. It got down as low as $20, $22 a barrel last year. Okay, that's bad. That's really bad for the oil industry. So oil and gas, they're always looking ways to reduce their operating costs. Okay, so, and they may not know what that is with drones. You know, I had a few things that I've thrown out there, but that's relatively in the last 2 years. There's more other, there's other things that you guys may think of that could save a company money. Same thing with ag. We've talked about the farmer understanding his crop, the health of his crop, and increasing his yield. That's the bottom line. You increase your yield, he's more profitable because he's able to sell more product on the market. He makes more money. That improves his bottom line. Do you see drones having a big impact on oil and agriculture? Absolutely, I do. Okay, there's technologies that they haven't thought of yet. And if you guys are one of you guys here in the room that thinks of something that's going to save them a lot of money, you'll be very successful. How has your personal small business experience benefited you within your current job at Chevron? The big difference is when you're on your own as an entrepreneur, you got to figure out things for yourself. When you're in corporate America, they typically have training programs that they train you on specifically to your job. You kind of like got on-the-job training, but you're very limited to that. So if you're an engineer, you're a mechanical engineer, it's focused around your degree. It's not, they don't say, okay, well, here's business. Here's something else that you need to know. You got, as an entrepreneur, you got to know everything because they say you're the janitor, you're the president, you're the CEO, you're a chief financial officer. You got to know finances. You got to know business. Okay, you know what's it going to take to get a loan to go to the next level. Then you got to go out and sell. You got to do sales and marketing. So you have to have multiple disciplines to be a successful entrepreneur. Okay, and so you're very well rounded in that. What made your business shut down? The decrease in customer needs within the community or tasks within the lack within the company. Okay, so this is where they probably don't even mention it or teach you anything in college. But you have, when you go out on your own in the real world, after you graduate, you get your master's. Y'all are going to get masters, right? Okay. There's other things that they don't teach you. So back when I had my company, we competed. We were a low voltage contractor, and we competed with electricians that could do high voltage. The way the rules were in California, we could do work like networking, network cabling, fiber optic cabling, anything less than 90 volts or less. With electrical contractors, they could do all the high power lines. All the way down, they could do our work. The problem is that I did a lot of what the public sector work, like for colleges, K through 12 education. And there's rules in California where you have to pay a certain hourly rate to your technicians, your field techs. Okay, as a low voltage contractor back then, most of my work was with AT&T and Verizon. Okay, and back then they had their own union, which is called Communication Workers of America. And then the electricians, the people that did work for PG&E and the big guys, electrical work, they had their own union, IBEW, International Brotherhoods of Electrical Workers. The same task defined by that union had a wage difference of anywhere from $10 to $15 an hour. So my guys that I had to pay $35 an hour to an hour, and this is 10, 15, 20 years ago, the electrical guys had to pay $45 to $50 an hour. Okay. So when we competed on bids against the electrical contractors up and down the state here in California, we always won because we had a lower overhead for our project. Our labor cost was $10 to $15 lower. Okay. Union didn't like that. Okay. And the way the unions work is that it's not company based. You work for the union, you could work for X, Y, and Z electrical company this month on a project, and then work for another one on a different project. But you were still making the same wage rate for the type of work you were doing. My guys weren't that way. They worked for me exclusively. Okay. So what happened was, and this is something college, they don't teach this in college, is the electrical union, in my opinion, they don't play nice. Because I was taking a lot of business with them up and down the state, they went after me. They were telling my guys that I wasn't paying the right prevailing wage rate for them. And so now my guys are saying, hey, why is this electrical company getting $15 more an hour than us here at Accelerate Technologies? And it's because we were under a different union. So what happened was, basically, I'm going to shorten the story up. If one of your employees reports you to the state that you're paying the incorrect wage rate, it caused a big mess. I had to go in front of the state and prove that, hey, my guys are paid union wage rates at CWA. Look at your classification of what you guys have stated in your schedule, your wage schedule for that work, and look at them. The problem was the same work was different, had a different name to it. One was, from the electrical side, it was journeyman electrician, and from the communication side, it was communication technician. But they're doing the same work, but two different wage rates. The problem was, if I was found guilty and I had done millions of dollars of work, they were trying to find me $1.2 million in back pay and penalties for paying what they considered was a wrong wage rate. The problem was I didn't have an electrical contractor's license. I had a low voltage contractor's license. So my dilemma that I had was, do I continue on and the union applies more pressure, and then the state tells me we could go back 7 years and fine you because I had to keep 7 years of payroll records. So now 1.2 million in basically 2 years, you multiply that by 7 years, it's a lot of money, okay? So I had to make a decision. Do I continue doing the work, or do I and pay the higher wage rate, or do I continue the work and not pay the higher wage rate? Either way, if I did the work and paid the higher wage rate doing electrical contractor's work, and I'm not an electrical contractor, I was going to get penalized. And I would admit guilt that I was paying the wrong wage rate to my employees. So then they're going to go back and penalize me and all that. If I didn't pay it, continue on, and they decide to press it, then now, let's say 2 years later, they decide to go after me or after my business for the back wages for 7 years, I had no choice. So at that point, I closed the business down because I didn't want to deal with it. What they did, what the state did later on, this is politics, is that they eliminated the communication technician classification. So everybody had to go the higher wage rate. And that's how the state took care of it. And then they told me they had the right to go after me for 7 years, and I figured, you know what, I can't win with that. You know, so that's what happened to the business. What do you enjoy the most about your job? What is something you would change? What I like about the job is I like to play with new technology. Okay. As an entrepreneur, you're always looking for niches. What can you do as a business that your competitor can't do, or you could do better? So you're always thinking in those terms. Okay, and that's what I like, because you got to stay active. I tend to read a lot of magazines and stay up on stuff, and I talk to different people in the industry. Whether it's oil and gas, I'll talk to another oil company, or if it's ag that I will learn, I'll start talking to people. I mean, Omar contacted me on LinkedIn. LinkedIn is great. When I started my own business, we didn't have social media. So my recommendation to you, if there's something that business you want to start, come up with that idea, that business. That's what I did. I had a business plan. I proved it to myself in my mind by writing the business plan, and I ran different scenarios against it. I had spreadsheets and everything. And I looked at what the trend was as far as technology was concerned. That's how I did. I didn't have social media. My recommendation is find a mentor. I don't care if it's steam clean. You want to open up a steam cleaning business and steam cleaning rugs. Find a mentor. But then really study the businesses that are out there. What are they doing right versus what are they doing wrong? And how would you, if you had that business that you're looking at, make it better, make it profitable, okay? And understand your competition. That's very important, to understand your competition. I wouldn't change anything. That was the other part of that question. Which one of your jobs prepared you most for your career, and why? I'm going to say when I went out on my own to become an entrepreneur, I had to learn everything. I mentioned this earlier, that you just don't learn one aspect. For example, if you want to start your own business, okay, and you're by yourself, you're starting it from scratch. You're the founder. You're going to add more people. You don't just learn how to fly, because that's not it. You got to know how to go out and market yourself. You got to know about the technology. You got to know human resources aspect if you have employees. Okay, that in itself is, you be a professional being an HR person. Okay, and you got to know the business. What's requirements to have the business? For example, with Chevron, you can have a minimum $1 million liability policy. Okay, and if you're starting a new business out and you don't have the experience, you got to figure out how to get that insurance policy. I think when I started back then, in the beginning, it was like $20,000, $30,000 a year just for insurance to have that much. So that's why you've got to really understand every aspect of, and that helped me, because when I went and was a contractor and I worked for Chevron, I was basically an employee that was contracted. I knew about other aspects that my fellow employee that didn't have my experience knew. Okay. And part two of that is always you got to place, you have to understand what your earning potential is as an individual, whether it's an employee or whether it's a business owning your own, an entrepreneur owning your own business. Okay. So how you do that is that it's no different than selling a widget on the market. What will the market bear to buy this widget? So for you as an individual, building your resume, building your experience, building your education background. That's why I'm saying masters. If you have a master's and you know a lot about drones and you've got various experiences in different industries and you know how to run a business, you can be successful because you have the right tools in your tool bag. And that's where your earning potential goes higher. The more you know, the more experience you have, you know, the higher you're going to get paid. And then whether you're in your own business, you're going to make more money, or whether you're an employee, you'll be able to demand more based on that. So understand what your earning potential is and always try to increase that by doing little things like education, like experience, and that helps quite a bit. Did your experience as a private pilot somehow transfer over to your work with drones? Absolutely. Understanding FAA rules as a pilot, airspace, around airports, I mean, it dovetailed in. It's just really the same thing. What was the deciding factor that made you change jobs? Well, the deciding factor when I was working at Texaco and I quit and started my own company is that, in my mind, even though my new boss was really trying to put pressure and limit my career upward mobility, I knew I was better than that. I knew my earning potential, and I wanted to prove him wrong. So I went out and started my own business. And with that said, my first contract was with Texaco out of Los Angeles. And my first contract in '89, the first contract with the same company, was $400,000, and 3 people did the project. Okay, I mentioned before, I started my company without getting a loan from anybody, not even my friends, only because I saved up, I worked hard, and I knew what my budget was based on my business plan, my spreadsheets. I knew what I needed to do. And I had milestones that I set for myself to start the business, and that helped out a lot. Visualize. As an entrepreneur, you got to visualize where you want to be in 30 days, in 3 months, in 6 months, in 1 year. And make sure you meet those milestones, because that'll tell you, and again, one thing also, a business plan is very dynamic because things change. So it's okay if you make a change your business plan, as long as you're moving forward. Okay, so never ever. I'm just going to say that for myself, but I wouldn't have a static plan. It's got to be dynamic because things change with technology and industry. Okay, where we at? Oh, here. What issues did you come across in the beginning? In the beginning of my career or being an entrepreneur? Who asked the question?
That was Derica. Did you mean in the beginning of his career or when he first opened his business?
In the beginning. No, I'm sorry. When he first opened his business. Like what obstacles?
What obstacles? I think is really establishing a name for myself. You know, you have the best business plan in the world, but if you don't have customers to support that, you got to you got to evangelize your business. If you don't believe in your business, 100 and I'm going to say 20%, no one else is, even at 80%. So believe in yourself. Being an entrepreneur is not easy, but it could be very, very rewarding in many ways. Okay. So if anybody in here, I recommend, if you want to be an entrepreneur, believe in yourself. You're going to don't be afraid of failure, because through failure, you learn something, okay? And what you learn in failure makes you more successful down the road, okay? When I had my business from 88 to 93, I did very well. I had 50 employees. We were debt-free. We didn't have any bank loans. I take that back. We built a building, and we took out a loan for the building. So it's like having a mortgage. But for the most part, we didn't have any other loans because I worked from scratch. I worked my way up, and I was very frugal. You got to be frugal about your money. What you don't want to do is when you start becoming successful and you start bringing the money in, start buying nice cars, nice homes. Don't ever do that. Always think that, yeah, there's going to be rainy days and there's going to be good days. And, be conservative, because you'll get to the point that if you if you get too complacent or too much of yourself, as I'm going to call it, something happens. Like the IRS will come in and say, or like the union with me, because I was full of myself too. And now I'm facing a penalty of $1.2 million, because of the union. So you got to really stay on top of everything financially. Don't let things, always pay your taxes. Because the IRS and the state of California, they will take your money if you don't pay them. And you know what? You got to play by their rules, because that's just the way it is. And yeah, you just got to. It's part of doing business. If you end up paying 45% taxes, that's part of doing business in California. If you have to have a $30,000 or $1 million liability policy that costs you $30,000 a year to maintain, okay, just to have, that's part of doing business. So build that in your business plan and accept it. Is there anything you would change about your career? Absolutely. And I would change, because I'm telling you guys this, is I would have got my degree. I don't know if I would have got my master's back then, because back then, if you had your 4-year degree, it's kind of like having a master's. But nowadays, you got to have a master's, because there's so much competition. There's in corporate America. So if you're going to work in corporate America, get your master's. It's only 2 years more, and that's a very small period in your lifetime. If you live to be 80 years old, 2 years is nothing. But it gives you a lot of value. It increases your earning potential by having a master's degree, higher education. What is the best advice you would give someone that is trying to start their own business? Do your research. Find a mentor. Get on LinkedIn. The problem with that, though, is I will tell you there's a lot of people that don't want to share. There's some people that do, and there's some people. So if you can find a mentor, better yet, go work for somebody, but don't tell them that you're educating yourself. Go find a drone company if you want to start a drone company, and go work for them. Be a pilot. Do post-processing for them, so you understand what it takes, what they have to go through. Don't tell them, or find somebody that's willing to, to share. Okay, I'm willing to share because I went through a lot, and I want to see young people like yourselves be successful. Period. Whatever you want to do. So I want you guys to believe in yourself. How did you get started in this profession? I think I kind of went through that. I saw something in IT, networking computers way back when, and I just kind of went that direction and fell in place. For me, it was like 80% luck and 20% knowledge and experience. What if a big responsibility working on a drone project? What was the biggest responsibility? Safety. Safety is big. Big companies like Chevron have they probably spend, well, at that time, I think the number was, let's say it's a $1 million project, they'll spend anywhere from 20 to 30% on safety training, safety equipment. It's important. They don't want anybody to get hurt. So that's the biggest responsibility, safety, especially when you're flying drones. You don't want a drone to hit somebody and hurt somebody, whether take an eye out or a propeller taking a finger off somebody's hand. Which job did you enjoy the most? I'm going to say the one where I was a contractor on the proof of concept, because I got to deal with new technology from very, very intelligent people. These people that developed this technology they want to test, they're pretty smart, a lot smarter than I was, and I learned a lot from them. What has been the biggest highlight of your career? I'm not sure how to answer that. Gosh, just what I experienced. If I want to say anything, it's just experience everything. And then when I became a contractor, it was kind of, for Chevron, it was fun because I got to do pretty much something similar, but I didn't have the responsibility of running a business. So I didn't have to worry about whether I could make payroll that month or that week. As your own business, you got to worry about that because you got to pay your employees. They're not going to work for you if you don't pay you. But I had fun because I learned a lot. I made a lot of friends at Chevron too. If you don't enjoy your job, it doesn't matter how much they pay you. It doesn't matter. I mean, you're not going to like it. You'll get to that point too, I think. What advice can you give the students in our class who are working on the drone project, or what input can you give for their venture to be successful? Come up with a business plan. What do you want to offer? If it's a drone business, there's many things you could offer. You could do real estate. You could do motion picture. You could do mapping for like a oil and gas company. You could do ag work. Figure out, do your research, do your business plan, and stick to it. And if it's ag, learn everything you can about ag and the technology. Okay, I will tell you, be aware of that right now because it's relatively new. There's a lot of companies have their own spin on the technology. So really understand that, because what you don't want to do, some of these drones are expensive. Okay, they range anywhere from a simple, $500 drone that takes pretty cool pictures, like the DJI. I think the Phantom 3 was like $500 when it came out. It had a high-resolution camera, all the way up to, and these are the small ones, less than 55 pounds. You could spend $50,000, $100,000 on them. And that's a big investment for a small business. So you got to make sure if you're going to spend even $10,000, that you're going to get return on your investment. Because not only that, you have that equipment cost, you got your overhead, like the insurance. You got to pay yourself. You can't work for free, and you got your equipment. So you really put a lot of thought into that, and try to get a mentor if you can. What do you think about what oil industry will do due to Trump's being the president? Okay. You know what? The only way Trump's going to affect oil prices is if he causes conflict with the Middle East. If you guys remember, like Afghanistan, the Iraq War, that causes consumption in oil because you're trying to fuel the military, provide them oil or fuel, gasoline, diesel fuel, etc. It causes demand on the world. What I do know from reading a lot, because I do a lot of reading, is that, and I do know working in the industry, is that years ago, we in the United States didn't make enough oil for our consumption. And there was, we couldn't export oil up until last year, okay, because whatever oil we produce here in the United States had to stay because that was for us to protect us. That changed with fracking. You guys have heard of fracking. With horizontal drilling, okay, we as far as I'm concerned, the U.S. is, as far as technology, we're the leaders in oil field technology. Okay, this is what we developed. Steam injection is one. Steam injection is not used everywhere because there's light crude, free-flowing oil wells only here in California, and there's some fields like in Indonesia, Thailand, etc. But that technology was developed here in the U.S. Fracking was developed. When fracking was developed in horizontal drilling, we are producing more oil than we consume here in the United States. OPEC used to be a big factor in pricing, and because they have oil-producing countries like Russia, that's not part of OPEC. You got Venezuela, you got all these other countries that are producing oil, and there's too much oil in the world right now. So unless there's a conflict, which if it's a conflict in a oil-producing country, okay, which reduces production because of the war, and we increase consumption because we're trying to feed our troops, give them. Trump's really not going to have that. So, like I said, unless he causes conflict for whatever, and I hope he doesn't, that's just really not going to affect. Do you still fly aircraft for fun? I haven't flown in a few years, but I'm getting ready to. I want to go back to it because it's just, if you've ever been in a small airplane, everybody's been in probably the jet airplanes and all that. That's okay. But go out and fly in a small aircraft. It's just amazing. It's amazing on what you could see, even at 10,000 feet. And then night flying, and that's a whole different. That's a lot. You guys probably do night flying. You guys probably do very well because you play a lot of video games. Because it's just like a video game. You see all these lights, and then you're flying. The difference is when you crash in a video game, you're okay. When you crash in a real airplane, you're not. How were you drawn to the oil field industry? Was there any opening in the job? Is this something you were thinking of pursuing earlier in my career? I just wanted to move to Bakersfield, and Bakersfield back then was a big oil town, and that's where the money was. They were paying very well. When I started with Getty Oil Company back in, this is a long time ago. You guys are young. This was back in the 80s, mid-80s. I was making equivalent to just starting off without a degree. Probably equivalent of close to $90,000 a year. That's a degree. And that was at 22. I had a $5 million IT budget for Getty Oil because there wasn't anybody that knew anything about computers. I was lucky, and I saw something there that I wanted to pursue as far as a career. And again, it just fell into place. Is a pilot's license difficult to obtain? I'm going to say no. It's not. You got to study a lot. You got to understand the rules and regulations, airspace, altitudes to fly. There's certain rules. The hardest thing about getting your pilot's license now is the cost. To rent an airplane, because you got to fly eventually, and an instructor, an airplane could cost you what they call wet charge, which is with your fuel, an hourly rate's about $125 an hour. Then on top of that, you got to pay for an instructor anywhere from $50 to $75 an hour. So you're looking at $200 an hour to get your time in. Okay, and I'll tell you how crazy I was and how confident I was in myself. And that's why I say that about being an entrepreneur. You got to have confidence in yourself. I only had 3 hours, and I rented airplanes for 3 hours, and I said, you know what? I don't want to rent airplanes. It's costing too much. So what I went out and bought one before I had my license, in only 3 hours of flying an actual airplane. Okay. Where I got lucky is when I sold that airplane. I bought this airplane for $18,000. That's where the business mind's got to come in. Don't make it a hobby. Make it a business. If you want to learn how to fly. I did a lot of reading on airplanes and what was going on in the industry. I picked an airplane up for $18,000, which was good at that time. 5 years older, I sold it for $36,000. So if you have a hobby that's expensive, like flying, turn that into a business. One of the reasons why I had an airplane in my business, because it was part one, I was able to go to a meeting in Sacramento and back in basically a few hours for the whole day. But I wrote it off. So figure out how to do that, and you'd have fun and make money. But if you're just going to fly just for fun and part-time, I wouldn't buy an airplane out of rent, because what they say about boats and airplanes, boats are like holes in the water that you got to throw money in. Planes are like holes in the sky that you throw money into, because what hurts a plane is when it sits in the hangar and you don't fly it. But then if you got to pay $5, $6, $7 a gallon for fuel, and you're burning, say, 14 gallons an hour to fly it, plus you're paying insurance and paying hangar space and paying plane payments, you'll find out pretty quick that you can't afford it. So again, look at it as a business. If you're going to have a business that you're not going to make money in, you're not going to do the business. So same thing with airplanes. What in your eyes is the hardest part about starting up a business? I'm going to say the hardest part is accepting failure and turning that into a positive, learning something. Because you will have failures, minor fails. Hopefully you don't have some major fails. And don't be afraid. You got to You got to have confidence in yourself that you can do this. But you also have to that's why the business plan comes in. You got to make sure that it's thought through, it's calculated, whatever you're going to do. I'm not saying go out and get a, $50,000 loan and just go start your own business, because you know what? You're going to fail. Try to, in your business plan, try to do it on your own without taking a loan out, because a loan puts more pressure on you. If you have venture capital, they're going to take your business from you when it's successful. Part 3 is, if you start your own business, have the mindset that you're not going to own the business forever. That you're going to build a business until it peaks, and then you're going to sell it. Okay? You're going to either retire or reinvest, but don't ever plan on keeping that business. Build it to sell it. Okay? You guys know Bill Wright, Toyota, right? Okay. He's no longer around, but I had 4 or 5 hours with him because his second or third wife that he married happened to be related to my wife at the time. And we were at a funeral in Bishop, and he needed a ride home, and I got to talk to him. And just in those 4 hours, I learned a heck of a lot. He was so successful. He had Toyota dealerships in the state of Washington. He sold 900 cars a month in 1 month at his dealerships. He actually bought a jet to go back and forth from California. That's how successful he was. He didn't fail because the way he ran his business. He failed because the Attorney General at the time, this is hearsay, up in Washington, all the dealerships complained. It was a good old buddy system up there. And they basically had big lawsuits against him. They said that he was false advertising and all that, and he couldn't take it anymore, and he pulled out of Washington. He's still successful. He's no longer with us. But he also told me with employees, you have to delegate work to them or responsibilities, and you have to validate and verify. Always follow up with them. Okay. Always repeat what your expectation is to them, so you have a level. It's communication, a level of understanding. Okay, so it's when your company starts to grow, because my company's starting to grow at that time, and I was struggling with that, and he told me what I need to do. And then he said, verify and validate, with them, that they're doing what they're supposed to.
We've got about 5 minutes left.
Okay.
I figured this was a nice kind of feel-good one to end on, so we'll make this
here?
the last question. Yeah.
Why did you stay in Bakersfield? There are many more opportunities elsewhere. You're absolutely right. And recently, I moved, like last week, and I moved to Dallas, Texas. Okay, so had better opportunities there, and I actually flew back because I had some other things I had to take care of. But I don't live in Bakersfield anymore. I love Dallas. I've only been there a few days. It's gorgeous, but don't limit yourself. I lived like in a shell. I went from Ridgecrest to here, and I lived here since 1982 to 2016. And you know what? Thinking, man, I had my business, and that kept me here. But keep an open mind. You never know where you're going to find your next opportunity. Again, keep on working on your education. Keep on filling your toolbox. Get the experience, and more importantly, have confidence in yourself. Don't ever let anybody tell you you can't do that. Have that motivate you to prove them wrong, and that's how I got started. Anyway. Thanks for having me.
Richard, thank you very much. And I really hope you didn't fly back just for this.
No, I had some other business to take care of, but I would have anyway.
Well, I really appreciate you being here. I didn't realize you came from Dallas.
No, I haven't been here.